Good afternoon to everyone. Very pleased to be in Pristina for the Digital Summit 2022 as the fifth in row, which started as an idea in 2017 and it developed further as the regional flagship event for digitalization. And we started all together with the Western Balkan economies, the journey from Skopje. And then we traveled to Belgrade, Tirana, Podgorica, and we are today in Pristina. And we are very pleased to see that the discussions we're having here are getting the interest of many participants from the region and from the partners. We in RCC have embarked in actions that derive from the Common Regional Market Agenda, in which the Regional Digital Agenda is one of the flagship initiatives that also builds on the Digital Agenda for the Western Balkans that was launched by the Commission in 2018, and for which the Western Balkan economies have already undertaken a lot activities and actions, and the progress is visible. We also see through our Balkan Barometer survey that we do annually that the importance of digitalization is increasing, but what strikes us the most is that the importance of digital skills, both from the citizen's perspective and from the business perspective, is increasing. And given we have also used the survey in a way to guide the actions that we do in RCC jointly with the economies, we have started the process of networking of many actors in the region to address digital skills from a holistic approach, while trying to get public administration on board, international organization, partners, academia, and we have in a way tried to mainstream the digital skills as a concept, but also as a need throughout many policy agendas, while addressing the needs of targeted groups, and we have many of them identified already from the region, be it public administration, be it vulnerable groups, women, youth, Roma as well, community, and we have always seen these target groups as socioeconomic partners that would contribute in the development of our region. Today's side event, and also being in this digital summit where the main theme is also the digital skills, we thought, and we jointly organized this side event with the European Commission, and I would like to thank them on our behalf and on your behalf as well, to be with us in all the activities we do in this regard and addressing the most pressing needs of different target groups. For everyone to also understand a bit the choreography of today's side event and what we aim to achieve through that, we jointly discussed and agreed that it would be good to provide to the audience a bit of policy perspective in digital skills, and then very practical needs and challenges that target groups have, with a focus this time on Roma community, youth, and women. This does not mean that other target groups are not important, but of course we try to identify the ones who have the most pressing needs on the matter. And with this, I'd like to invite in this opening part of the side event Georgi Dimitrov from the European Commission, one of the most and the strongest supporter of RCC in the digitalization and the actions. So thank you to you and to also our colleagues from DG NIR that I don't see them now. Adrian is there, but I know that also Adrian, Marta, and the team who supported us in this endeavor. So let's start with the presentation of Georgi first, and then we'll walk you through the discussions with our four esteemed panelists That would be further facilitated in the discussion from our facilitator, Marius Jeta. So let's start with Georgi first with the presentation, and then we'll follow. Thank you.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. It's very nice ambience here, so thank you very much to the Regional Cooperation Council for this invitation. Very pleased to be here in Pristina for this Western Balkans Digital Summit, and very glad to provide this policy perspective. I would give you an overview of some of the main policies around digital education and skills by the European Commission, and then I would like to address some of the questions related to digital skills that you have mentioned. Perhaps leaving a bit more the experienced colleagues around the table to talk about also some of the needs. There is a PowerPoint which will just show up in a second, but I would start anyway, and I think I would just say that we are all aware how important the digital transformation is. We have experienced, I think, excellent speeches this morning, framing the subject from quite a lot of perspectives, and this is important from a lot of perspectives, because digital skills is not a matter of just one, let's say, ministry, and I'll come back to this in a second. And I think that also in the Western Balkans, the numbers speak for themselves. I think here in Kosovo, it's almost 100% connectivity, if I'm well informed. More than 80% of people in the Western Balkans have used the internet last month. We have very high penetration rates. At the same time, if you look at the other part of the picture and ask yourself how are the people equipped with digital skills, then you see a very worrying picture, and this picture is very worrying in the European Union. And it is, based on the data we have for the Western Balkans, also quite worrying for here. For example, in the European Union, 54% of people have basic digital skills. This is the adult population, and this is, by and large, not sufficient for the kind of challenges we have. Also, we have only 1 out of 5 graduates who are women in terms of ICT. We have 1 out of 3 graduates in science, technology, engineering, and maths, which is a woman. This is not really acceptable. And also, when it comes to the digital divide, there are huge discrepancies based on really 2 main factors: rural and urban divide, and the other huge factor is really socioeconomic background, and here we can look into the vulnerable groups as well of the different kinds. So we can go perhaps to the next slide, if there is someone who can help me, and we can just close that one. That's not from me, at least, and then we can go to the next slide, because this one I already did. Now, all of this is to say, and to start with a message which I think the Commission has been driving for some time, and is very well expressed in what our President has said recently, that the digital transformation of our democracies needs to have a purpose, and no one needs to be left behind. And I think this is a very big statement, and a lot of ambition is there. So I would like to show a bit, from our side what we are doing. So next slide, please. To start with, a couple of major policy initiatives which are operating at EU level before I come to the Digital Education Action Plan. First of all, there is the Digital Decade, which is a flagship initiative which is calling for at least 80% of the adult population in the European Union to have basic digital skills by 2030. I said just a minute ago that today we are at 54%, and you may think that between 54 and 80 the difference is not so huge, but I will add that the growth rate in the last 5 years has been basically 0, so the challenge that we're experiencing is huge. And if we would continue business as usual, as we do, it is very likely that we will not reach those very high objectives. So we have very high objectives when it comes to the skills attainment, but we need to also accelerate on some other fronts, and I'll come back to this in a second when it comes to education and training. We have the skills agenda, which has put a lot of emphasis on the inclusion and on accessibility, also in terms of digital skills, not only. And we also have the next generation package, which has been designed and started as a follow-up of the COVID crisis, and which includes the recovery and resilience facility. So these are huge investments which are related also to addressing the question of the digital skills gap. Maybe we can go to the same slide if you don't mind. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so I can operate it. Thank you. Then what we also have is when it comes to education, we have launched the European Education Area, with which we would like to deepen further cooperation in education and training in the EU, but also beyond. And a very important aspect here, which I know that you are aware of also, is the Western Balkans Agenda on Innovation, Research, Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, which has put forward a comprehensive and a long-term strategy for cooperation with the region. And it has digital as one of the thematic priorities. Last but not least, and I think it's kind of fitting very well, just last week, the President of the Commission announced that in 2023, we would like to have the European Year of Skills. And we expect that we would be focusing also even more on digital skills than before. Now, this is about the bigger picture, and if we now zoom in a little bit about education, and if I may mention the Digital Education Action Plan, which is a EU policy initiative which we started and launched 2 years ago. We have adopted this policy in a long-term perspective. It has this, well, maybe what seems like a very long-term perspective of 7 years, but this is because it is aligned to the policy cycle of the European Union and to its programming cycle, which is 7 years. And here we really have guiding principles of high-quality education, inclusiveness, and lifelong learning, and we would like to see those adapted also in digital education. And obviously this is not something that can be achieved in 2 years or in a short period of time, but it is an underlying principle of the whole initiative. What we have put forward also is a number of initiatives which I would mention to some extent later. You can see this document. But what I would like to stress is that with the Digital Education Action Plan, we have put forward also the approach to have an even stronger cooperation in education and training policies. This means to engage with different stakeholders much more than before. This also means more internal cooperation in the governments. We call this whole government approach, whereby we would engage ministries which are, to give you an example, if we take connectivity, obviously the Ministry of Education would be to a certain extent competent to advise and to advance, and we need to have the Ministries of Infrastructure or the Ministries of Transport, and this is also to an extent addressing the problem of the really multitude of policies that need to be embedded in any modern digital skills development approach. We have leveraged on the Erasmus program. I will mention a couple of points later on. But perhaps a key message for you and for this panel when we speak about inclusion is the following. When we look into digital education, we do see two main priorities, and they are like the two sides of the same coin. On the one side, it's the question of infrastructure, equipment, access, digital content, everything which is needed to enable an education system to be working well also in a digital age. Because, you know, we are in the digital age, so we need this to be adapted. And there is a lot of technical factors which are linked to this. And these factors need to work well, because without them working well, any ambition for digital education is just, let's say, just an ambition on paper. So there are very hardcore elements that need to be addressed there. The questions of access, the vulnerable groups with equipment, and so on and so on. But at the same time, what is needed, and this is the second priority, which is underlining the Digital Education Action Plan, is that without a digitalization of education, it will not be possible to improve our digital skills, simply because the nature of technological development requires us to develop as we go. And so the second point is that to enhance digital skills and competences is something which is fundamentally important, but it cannot work without the digitalization of the system itself. So I know that this may sound a little bit too high level, but it is really, really important, because when we look at where digital education is working well versus where it does not work well, we see normally a lot of silos. Where it does not work well, people don't work with each other, and so on and so forth. So these are two of the underlying factors, and I would like to come to my maybe concluding remarks with a couple of examples from the Western Balkans, because we are, in the end of the day, talking about the Western Balkans. Allow me to say that when you cross borders, sometimes the challenges are very different that you encounter, but sometimes they are very similar, and I think that when it comes to digital education and skills, they are very similar when you come to the Western Balkans. So I think there is a great deal of actions that we have launched from the Digital Education Action Plan that we can successfully deploy and promote. And in fact, we do this here. We do this together with our colleagues from the Commission. And I would like to mention a few examples. They are over there. You can Google them later on if you're interested. These are things which are working also in the EU and which are also accessible from the Western Balkans. One is the Digital Opportunity Traineeship, which is essentially a mobility scheme under the Erasmus Plus program to allow higher education and vocational and education and training students to do an internship in a company so that they develop their digital skills. And this allows really to gain hands-on experience, because this is what we see often lacks from people coming out of universities. I mean, it's great theoretical knowledge, but practically speaking, sometimes we can probably do a little bit better. So the Digital Opportunity Traineeships is accessible. Maybe another example which I'll just highlight to not go through everything is the Erasmus Virtual Exchanges. Now, the Erasmus Virtual Exchanges basically allow mobility in digital ways. And I think, especially after COVID, we all appreciate that there is a certain level of flexibility in work, in learning, in life. So it is possible to do virtual exchange through Erasmus. And the opportunity is open from last year also for the Western Balkan regions. Maybe one tool which has been quite successful is the self-assessment tool, which is also quite popular in the Western Balkans. Essentially, this is a self-assessment for schools which would like to see how their digital capacities are developing or where their gaps are. And this tool, which we launched 3 or 4 years ago, again under the Digital Education Action Plan, has by now been used by more than 200,000 learners and teachers in the Western Balkans alone. And so I would like to highlight this because we see also quite a successful application of this in some EU member states. But this is coming back to my point that we share very similar challenges. The position may be slightly different, but I would like to draw your attention to the fact that Selfie is accessible in all the languages as well of the Western Balkans, and it is operating pretty well from what we can see in terms of really using it from a teacher's perspective or from a learner's perspective. And one last point that I can finish off perhaps is the Digital Education Hackathon. Now I saw this very nice gathering of young people downstairs, which is like a hackathon. I don't know if they would stay for 24 hours or not, but in any case, the hackathon is an initiative also of the action plan, and we have run it for 3 years quite successfully, so far limited to, let's say, some member states, and we would like to reach now all the Western Balkan region with the next iteration that we're going to open as of next year. We have so far not really been able to do that, but I think there is some ambition here that we would also like to put forward. Well, this is, in a nutshell, the perspective which I wanted to share with you. And I would like to perhaps conclude that the digital and inclusion that you have put forward as a motto, I hope that it is obvious that they are kind of not, you cannot exclude them from each other, so they do belong together. And there is a lot of work that we are also doing from the Commission side to support the Western Balkans in order to advance on this cause. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And indeed, I think that was a very nice introduction as well to the panelists. But what strikes me the most in what you said is that digital skills or gap in digital skills is not a concern, a challenge, a need in the Western Balkans only. So, of course, we're not happy to see that this is still an issue in the EU, but in a way it makes us think how much we should invest in that. And another point that I wanted to flag from your presentation was the focus on the education. It's true that COVID in a way tested us all what it means to study from home. And access, connectivity, inclusiveness, and possibility to follow online the lectures and teachers is of course something that without the skills cannot be managed. And an assessment that Graz University prepared in 2020 showed that the Western Balkan citizens are more prone to continue and to use the digital education even after the pandemic will be over. But I would like to, and I hope that that would be also something that we'll hear from the panelists. Education is, of course, a long-standing objective policy for all the economies, and the governments in the Western Balkans are doing that. But sometimes we forget that there are also some non-formal education forms that really help, in particular, vulnerable groups, and can bring benefits in a short run. Either through traineeship, coaching, participation in, let's say, sharing experience with businesses and working closely with them. And that, in a way, brings a different perspective to how we all together can think of the digital skills in our digital decade, let's say. So by networking all together and having this inclusiveness in mind while trying to address the needs of different target groups and vulnerable groups, I think that we are making a step forward in how we address the overall digital skills gaps and needs. To make our side event also very practical and to move a bit from the policy perspective of the digital skills, we have here 4 distinguished panelists and also our facilitator of the panel that would guide through the discussion with the needs among the panelists. I just have to say that most probably you all realized that this gender gap is also visible in the panel itself. It was not intentional. And it was not at all our aim, but as one of the panelists said while we were joking among us, all of them are married with women and very strong ones, so I think that they also have a gender perspective in their presentation. So I'll leave now the discussion of the panelists in the hands of our facilitator. So Marius, the floor is for you. Please guide us through the panel discussion. Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much. I would first like to welcome everybody who is present in the panel. I would like also to be thankful to the colleague from the Commission who was very clear in his explanation about what the umbrella institution aims to do and implement in the field. And I will like to open up the time that it's ahead of us, which is not too much, a bit of an hour and a half to move on with 4 panelists and hopefully with a lot of questions from what has been said earlier. Because it caught my mind the fact that both of you referred to the fact that digitalization means people and means businesses. But I think people is way too large to be considered as a concept as people, because within people there are various layers of citizens across the countries living in different conditions. And this is an aspect that we and you, actors of digitalizations, in terms of designing policies, you need to pay attention to, because inclusiveness means a lot to pay attention to the needs that are of those that are part of what we call in this discussion and also in other discussion citizens, people or taxpayers. Yeah, it's commonly used to refer to us as citizens being the taxpayers, but also we do have particularities that we need to look at and to consider. So in that regard, the panelists that are here today are representing different sort of initiatives, but also they are representing groups that are to be characterized as being part of the vulnerable sides of the societies, both in Western Balkans, but not only, in EU as well. So I'm more than pleased to welcome the panelists as well. And we will start with Rejapali Chupi, who is the, if I'm not mistaken, interim co-director of Roma Education Fund. And then what I will propose to you, if you will agree, would be that after each of the presentations, if there are burdening questions, please address them, just to make sure that we don't end up having only presentations and then we say at the end, we don't have the time for you. So I'll invite the first speaker and then I will open the floor for the questions if there are questions to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Marius. Dear friends, first of all, allow me on behalf of the Roma Education Fund to thank the organizer of this panel for inviting us and also for the opportunity to contribute to the discussion. In the past 17 years, the Roma Education Fund in the region of Southeastern Europe played a key role when it comes to the education of the Roma community in all levels of education, from preschool until tertiary. It made a huge contribution in the process of inclusion, retention, and successful completion of highest possible level of education. And recently it started implementing projects that are aimed at additional support activities, developing skills and experience that should enable faster and easier employment of our beneficiaries after they complete their formal education. In this whole process, in addition to the students, our focus were and still are the parents, the teachers, the schools, and the educational policy makers, both on national and local level. Related to today's topic, the Roma Education Fund, like all other actors, faced a huge challenge at the beginning of 2020. How to contribute its work in terms of supporting the users to remain involved in the education system and to be able to follow smoothly the educational process and successfully to finish the school year. This challenge was certainly the result of the pandemic, which showed us all how important the digitalization process and the use of digital tools are, not only in the educational process, but also in all the other spheres. At that time, adequate housing, digital device, access to internet and electricity were the minimum conditions for our beneficiaries to be able to follow the teaching. We need to add here also the capacity of the parents to support their children in these challenging times, which of course were not and still are not on inviolable level. In response to the mentioned challenges, the Roma Education Fund has created emergency fund and action plan in order to provide support to the continuation of the education and learning. We, together with our partner organizations, took up the role of liaison between the community and the educational institutions. Materials and educational tools were provided in order to support the newly introduced digital learning, but also innovative approaches were taken and proven successful in easing the situation in which all of us were found. The total amount that we spent through the emergency fund was 568,000 euros. It supported projects in 10 countries in the first phase, and just the Western Balkan countries in the second phase in 2021. So far, 2,200 Roma students from each level of education have been provided with digital device and access to internet. 5,600 Roma students in primary, secondary, and tertiary level of education were provided with mentorship and tutorship support. 1,300 Roma families which have children in ECD level of education were provided with educational materials and toys. And 1,000 Roma families were supported in enrolling their children in ECD, primary, secondary, and tertiary level of education, because at that time the enrollment on the beginning of the new school or academic year was happening online. From all this experience and the process we went through, we learned that in addition to the students and their parents, also the teachers, the schools, and the policy makers faced serious difficulties when it comes to the digitalization process and the use of digital devices and methodologies in education. Related to this, as we all know, in 2018, the Commission, together with the ministries from 6 Western Balkan partners, committed to investing in broadband connectivity, increasing cyber security, trust and digitalization, strengthening the digital economy and society, boosting research and innovation. For every country and educational system, this implies serious investments in reforms aimed at adapting and further developing educational systems, which at operational level mean adequate public policies and methodologies, which mean new or adapted legislation, equipping schools for the implementation of appropriate policies and methodologies from an infrastructural but also a technical aspect, continuous training and professional development of the teachers, adequate technical and pedagogical equipment, not just for teachers but also for students, and adequate support for the parents. When it comes to the Roma community, the needs here are specific and much different than the others, which means a specific approach and support. From the experience we gained during the pandemic, we can say the following. When it comes to policies, reforms, and measures, there is a distinct lack of cooperation with the schools and lack of information on the needs of the Roma community. And hence we recommend mapping of the needs of the communities throughout the school year and tailor-made action plans in coordination with the parents, civil society organizations, and the Roma community. Communication with local and national stakeholders to advocate for addressing of these needs, and quality control mechanisms to be in place. Next, the schools and teachers should be partners, and this established communication is central in reaching out to all Roma beneficiaries and their educational needs. This is why we need to continue support to schools and teachers training for new pedagogical approaches and methodologies on distance learning and school digitalization. Online learning policies in line with the principle of equality, inclusivity, and sensitivity. Flexible educational approaches to learning and government's efficiency in making sure no child is left behind, and combining and offering state schooling services with civil society non-formal educational support. Here we should not forget the importance of the parents' engagement in the education process of their children. This brings results on both sides. Children feel supported, safe, and guided throughout the new process, and parents, of course, take the pride in being involved in their children's learning. However, for this to function, educational institutions should be actively involved in parents' continuous engagement in the educational process of their children with instructions and trainings on digital learning methods by the educational institutions. A principle that is absolutely crucial is for educational systems to incorporate flexibility in their approach to education, meaning that governments and schools must be able to divert the resources in a timely manner to ensure that no students gets left behind. The main goal of any reform or policy action should be to ensure that there isn't increase of dropout and maintain or even improve the quality of education. As you can see, the proposed measures are many and quite diversified from implementation to policy level, and it includes many stakeholders. Important point when designing policies, projects and interventions, besides all what was mentioned until now, is of course gender. We are increasingly aiming to have approaches with gender transformative activities and to mainstream gender into all phases of our interventions. Having in mind that the Roma population is quite diverse, therefore approaches, interventions, activities and results also must be diverse to reflect this reality. Finally, to emphasize the importance of participation of the public sector and professionals, local and national institutions of government, civil society organizations, monitoring agencies and others. Educational policies must reflect the needs of the Roma community and its internal and external diversity. This is a goal in need of a united front of organizations and would require support of many partners and stakeholders. At the end, I would like once again to thank the organizers for inviting us and for recognizing the important work that we do in the field of education. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to hearing all other panelists and exchange ideas during the discussion.
Thank you very much for this absolutely astonishing journey that you have taken under these severe circumstances that we've been part of. At least for me, the figures that you have used in the beginning showed that you have created a business model that can be taken on board and then upscaled, because the money invested were not tremendously high. I wouldn't say they weren't even high. The reach out to do with €500,000 activities in 10 countries, and you know it in which communities, it says a lot. It means that the model itself, it can be scaled up and should be embraced by the stakeholders that are responsible at local and national level. Therefore, thank you for summing up all the efforts that you did so far, and then for providing all this support to the community level. Because I would constantly insist on the fact that referring to a community implies a lot of particularities, because we have this tendency of looking at the community as a whole, but it might be a school in the center of a village that is fully equipped with everything, and then if you travel 300 meters away on a street, you discover a school which is a school, but lacks teachers, lacks digital competencies, lacks attendance, and exposes you to different problems. So all this detail are to be taken into consideration. If there are any questions that you want to address to our panelists, now it's your time. Go ahead. Please also introduce yourself.
Greetings, everyone, and distinguished panels and the participants. My name is Mimoza Gavrone. I'm from Pristina. I have a very short and concrete question for the presentation of Mr. Ali Chupe. Since you all have experiences in Balkans and you know the educational gaps and specifics that needs to be fulfilled. You also mentioned them from a policy level. Now my interest is to know in terms of merging the large scale of great projects that also Mr. Dimitrov has presented. Now my question is what is the level of integration or matching points in terms of your both strategies, just so the Roma community will benefit from the educational business aspects or other larger agendas that you will both address in the future? In particular in Kosovo, if you have any concrete plans, since we're here. Thank you.
Well, at this moment we are looking forward to approval of our applied project to DG NIR. It's a second phase, which was functioning the last 3 years in the region of Western Balkan countries plus Turkey. And that project was implemented exactly during the COVID time. So that project was also affected with the initial plan that we had, and we had to certainly change the approach and the activities that were planned at that time. We haven't concrete lessons learned from that project, and I believe that in the second phase we will be more ready and prepared with all this experience to try to expand it, not just in the community, but also and on policy level, because we started to advocate towards the ministries of education. This model that was developed ad hoc based on the pandemic challenges that we had easily can be a public policy with not so high financial implications in each ministry or in each country. So I believe that this experience with the Commission that we had, because this is a first big project that the Roma Education Fund has implemented, funded by the Commission, I believe that in the next phase we will be more prepared with new ideas and new approaches, but also taking into consideration all the changes that happened after the pandemic. And I believe that now the policymakers, the community, the schools are more aware and with more seriously will address this question and will enable us to provide our support on a highest level as it could.
I just wanted to compliment, although I'm not directly involved in the RCC of that, but given that the importance of Roma inclusion in the overall policy in the Western Balkans, but not only in the policy-making process, most probably all of you who are here today know that we have a dedicated Roma integration project that is run under the RCC umbrella, and that was quite successful and of course addressed several needs that, of course, I'm not from the project. I cannot tell all the details. Mimosa, you also, I know you know quite a lot of the activities of the project, but what I can add to that is that what we have tried in making this not only inclusion of Roma into mainstreaming them into agendas, but we have also tried to kind of internally make connections between the dots of different policy agendas that one organization have, like in this case in the RCC. And we are now discussing how to make Roma and digital, in a way, in this regard, compatible one with the other, and how to respond to the needs, in particular for the digital skills, through targeted actions. So I think that there are several attempts to that, but of course, this does not mean that it shouldn't be further streamlined in order for, let's say, in this case, for Roma community, to benefit the most from avoidance of overlapping, complementarities in the initiatives, and addressing the most pressing needs and challenges. Not everything can be addressed overnight, and there are certain needs that we just heard that go beyond, initiatives that we are currently doing. I mean, they require a lot of investments. They require many other partner organizations supporting to that. So I think. Yes, but this is why I'm saying that this is exactly what we're trying to do. So we're trying, through the support of European Commission, having dedicated projects when it comes to Roma, see within the existing initiatives that we are having in RCC, but as we heard as well from the Commission, many initiatives are there in which I guess inclusion of Roma is also a matter of how fast and how well, I mean, you that are the selected ones and that lead the community in a way in this fora are vocal and make this, you know, as, I mean, seen as important. So just to say that there are attempts, it's never enough, but it's good to also recognize that there are certain good experiences in the region in that.
Marius, if I may add just one sentence, because I mentioned the importance of participation of the public sector, professionals, NGOs, activists, and all the others who are present in the field. So we need to align between ourselves and our strategies, our plans, from policy to operational levels, because the space is huge, and we cannot, of course, alone address all the challenges that the community has.
Thank you very much for your ad, and I think you pointed out the proper radiography of the moment, meaning that all the actors are in the process of aligning themselves behind what it is important, and it's happening anyhow. This digitalization process that affects the policy making processes, that affects society in general, and unfortunately, by its own mechanism of happening, leaves aside mostly the ones that are vulnerable. And the reason we are here, and thanks to the organizer again, thanks to the Commission, it's particularly for this one, to make sure that the ones that by default are not in the process right away do have their voices heard, do express their particular needs in order to be considered specifically for their particularities. Thank you very much. And it comes absolutely normal for me. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Husseini and I work as a National Roma Youth Coordinator for organization Roma Active Albania. Actually, we were in a meeting with some of the colleagues at the European Commission regarding actually this meeting. And I wanted to say about regarding, like, in recent years we have seen that our societies are going through digitalization, but what is and online systems. But what we are looking at the Roma community is that they are accessing less the services. Digitalization is making Roma community access less the services, such as in healthcare, education, banking. So many Roma women and girls, men and boys, they can not access many services. And regarding what we have seen during the pandemic is that across the Western Balkan countries, during the COVID-19 pandemic and associated security measures, many Roma students, actually they found themselves unable to access online education due to absent infrastructure and digital equipment. Most Roma children and their families, particularly those living in rural areas and also in segregated settlements, they had no access to internet, computers, or other electronic devices, and in some cases even to electricity. Many schools where Roma children were going, they didn't, or they were studying, they didn't have proper infrastructure to fully support digital education. Roma parents have had very difficulties helping their children on homeworks, on doing them online, because they, in many cases, they don't have the financial resources to invest in digital education or to provide to their children technical support, and in some cases they don't even speak or read English. So my question actually is also, we have seen actually some cases where different NGOs have helped some children or students with digital tools, but was that enough? And what have been, in your case, Roma Education Fund, what have done to push the government to actually make Roma children to access those digital tools?
Thank you. The answer is that of course it's not enough. This was just a small part as a contribution from our side. With the invested money, we succeeded to prevent more than 7,000 students in each level of education to prevent just from dropout. We are not speaking about the quality, we are not speaking about progress, just to make sure that they didn't drop out from following the teaching at that time. And you can imagine in 12 countries where we work, this 7,000 is a very small number. So the need is huge. What we did with the governments, as I mentioned, we started advocating to promote this model and to try to scale it up on a policy level. But besides the governments and the ministries of education, we tried to involve in the public sector, which helped us and contributed to providing not just the devices, but also and the access to the internet. So, as I mentioned, this in order to address this issue, because in these challenging and difficult times, it's a big challenge when you address it on a policy level with each government or ministry.
Thank you very much. I think when we will come to our panelist, Marco, we will hear a perspective that would complete your efforts and somehow will also scale up our own understanding about what's happening on the market, if you want it, in regard to how education was helped and is aimed to be helped from now on. But before going to Marco, I will pass the floor to Petrica. Most of you know him. For those of you who do not know him, he's the Executive Director of Roma Entrepreneurship Development Initiative.
In with an avalanche of money. So the European Commission invested records amount of money for the EU bloc, and a bit less for the Western Balkans. The situation that I see in Europe, I'm based in Brussels, and I'm Romanian myself, is that years ago, when things were more or less okay, the governments were looking and trying to do something about the Roma integration strategy. When the whole majority population was impacted, guess what? The focus really needs to be on the majority, bringing them back. So my approach is, if all of us as a society were pushed a few steps behind, and now with the resources that the governments are pushing into the economy, only some of the people are going to be able to get those opportunities. And I know, for example, in Romania, and Marius knows a bit more because he works for the Romanian government, the time frame for implementing these projects is limited, and there's a big emphasis on absorption. Governments are actually working with those players that can absorb. So they're going for the low-hanging fruits, very similar to what you were saying at the beginning about the 50% accession. So it's very easy to get to some level, very difficult to improve afterwards. So what I have seen on the field, both in the EU as well as in the Western Balkans, is that governments are working with those that are able to join the conversation, which are not that far. And I'm afraid, and I hope this is not going to be the case, that in the next 10 years, the gap between those that have been able to benefit from all of these programs, which have been launched, and the ones which are too far, which require too much hand-holding, so this gap is going to increase. And on top of this COVID crisis, we now have an energy crisis, and we have inflation. So this really means that governments and their capacity to pay attention to the vulnerable communities, be it Roma, be it returnees, be it women, be it young, is limited. So we really need to have this on the stage, right? it is not a matter of resources. So it's very good to have resources. It's actually a matter of having capacity to implement those resources, to bring in the people. And I think it's very important that everything that we do should be focused on empowering these communities, enabling them to come towards the governments, to come towards the local authorities. Because in my experience in the past 30 years in Romania, the communities were expecting governments to come in. But someone in Brussels doesn't know how to fix the problem in Bitola, for example, in Skopje. So it really is a matter of establishing groups that can fend for themselves. So I'm now going to make a bit of a transition of what we're trying to do as REDI on employment. So one of the key groups that have not been really invited to this conversation is Roma businessmen. So we're speaking about the Roma communities, and we're always speaking about the communities as being disempowered and poor and uneducated. But not too many people are speaking about Roma businessmen who are actually very wealthy, some of them, who are running businesses which are very successful, but who are not really engaged in developing those communities. So what we're trying in REDI, and by far we're not successful, right? But we're trying, and we're trying to develop these mechanisms, is to establish Roma business clubs, where entrepreneurs in a community are working together, they're getting to know each other first, and they start looking at how can they improve the communities. What are the type of people they need in the future to work with, how they engage with the local authorities. And I think if we don't empower the communities to do this sort of community organizing, local action groups made by people that have and see opportunities rather than people that don't have and want someone else to come, I think we're for sure going to fail. Another thing that I believe is super important is, helping people use digital as a way to combat discrimination. Like, for example, if a Roma person is in the market, there's still quite a lot of racism in our society, be it EU or here. There's a number of people who decide to simply not buy a product if a person they perceive might be from the Roma community. So if the person uses digital tools to sell their products, well, his ethnicity or color of skin is completely irrelevant. So what we're doing in REDI, and I have my colleagues here who are from Skopje and really running these programs, we have a Roma Digital Academy. Part of it was implemented in partnership with RCC. The project is funded by Digineer, and it's all about equipping entrepreneurs who are developing their products to be able to sell online. And whenever we say Digital Academy, don't think we're teaching them how to code, right? We're teaching them how to use social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook Lives, to show to the people how they're producing those products. And the cost is not that expensive. We give people a smartphone, doesn't need to be an iPhone, a few €100 smartphone, a tripod, some lights, a microphone, and then they can build up a community around them who are interested in whatever they're making. So I think that can be a thing. But if we're speaking about what Recep was mentioning, education, right? Education has two sides. You look at young people, who, by the way, we really, really need to force them to stay in school. We still have a very big dropout, right? So education for young people. Well, what do you do with the needs? What do you do with a person who was born in the 2000, who is now 22, and is not in education nor employment? How is this person going to be included in the job market in 10 years? My daughter, she studies in the European school. She is already doing everything to do. She had people from Microsoft and Siemens talking to them about Industry 4.0. right? So how would a person from Șutorizari or Pristina be able to compete with my daughter studying in Brussels at a European school, right? Because all of these job markets are now becoming global, right? It's completely irrelevant if you're based in Pristina or if you're based in Paris, right? With Microsoft Teams, which we're all using, you can do your work, right? So I'll just stop here, and I'm really, really looking forward to have questions.
Thank you, Petrica. Plenty of food for thoughts, I would say. The fact that you underline the importance of community development at the community level, but also at the digital level, meaning that there is a digital community in there, that it's supportive and it's encouraging its members in order to run a business or to improve an educational process or to help a community member to have a better access to a digital health instrument for improving its health condition. All these are showing the relevance and the importance of the momentum. And the momentum, you've called it industrialization 4.0. We all are calling it digitalization. It happens as we speak. And it's important to make sure that it's inclusive enough, not only from the tools perspective, that we don't only provide the tablets or the smartphones, but also we provide the instruments for using those tools, meaning that we spend more time in communities as local stakeholders in order to make sure that everybody has access and knows how to use a digital instrument in order to improve his or her own life. Thank you. If there are questions for Petrica. Okay, if not, I'm just checking the time. We are 20 minutes away from ending our panel. Sorry for the pressure I'm putting on the next panelists. Then I will pass the floor to Marco Serafimovski, who works in SEMOS education, so I will let him to guide us through the work that he did and he does. Thank you, Marcos, for being with us.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you to RCC as well for the invitation. The first comment was that there was a lot of men on the stage today. Yeah, so I must mention that in SEMOS education, men are minority, actually. So we are the marginalized group. Basically, what we are like 50 people full-time employed, and we have like 5 men in the company. So basically, having a main person here is something that is rare to see. I heard a lot of you today, a lot of things. So what SEMOS education actually does, for those of you that might not know the company, we are an IT training center that delivers non-formal education, mostly IT, some project management as well, digital marketing as well, recently as it turns out to be a pretty widely used profession. What I've heard, and I'm trying to segment what I would like to take out in my few minutes. I think it should be a work done in, first of all, a mindset of all the people around. So all stakeholders. We mentioned today that there is a skills gap, that we mentioned Roma community, we mentioned women, we mentioned people with disabilities. Let's also mention this as well. So let's all focus on post-COVID period. So we've heard that the market is now global. So I think local is not local anymore. Everybody with the proper infrastructure. What I would strongly agree is that I think infrastructure is mostly there. So we have mostly good internet in this region. We are in European time zone, meaning we can work for a German, Austrian company, or it doesn't matter. I mean, in Europe, so for a European company. What we are, I think, lacking in this region is, first of all, the skills that are needed by the market, first of all. So why I'm saying needed by the market, because formal education is one thing, skills that are needed by the companies is another thing. Second thing, what we need is the bridge between what the company needs and the person that might has the skills but cannot get to the employer actually. So we have worked a lot with this. Why I'm saying us is because as an informal education we have worked a lot into creating programs that will enable people not to spend 4 years or 6 years in university and after that get themselves ready. Why? First of all, as an IT education center, IT as a segment, as a global segment, moves extremely fast. So technology is changing. Even IT professionals are having trouble to follow how fast the technology is changing. And if we take a person, it doesn't matter which type of person that would like to reskill, that would like to change their career, to pursue an IT career, to get employed, to work in this segment. 4 years of university is something that is too expensive in both time and money as well. So by the time somebody finishes university, it's already 4 years. So market has changed. We do work a lot in the direction of having equal opportunities for everyone. What we do projects, a lot of projects, marginalized groups, people with disabilities. What I would say is that we must work with institutions that know how to approach the marginalized groups, because what we can offer to anyone is the skills that are needed, but the approach is always different, because we need to merge these two things, so skills with the needs. Our segmentation of participants in all the courses as a total is 51 versus 49. So 51 are men, 49 are women, in terms of who comes to training. But what we are seeing difference in is that the more IT professional courses are visited by men. The more creative industries are visited by women, which is not a bad thing. There are opportunities for all these segments, I must say. What I think that, and we in Samos Education think can be done, is to start working from young age with everyone. So with any group that we would like to improve, we would need to start working from young age. Why? Because once the mindset of learning and following technology, following opportunities, being there is in the head of a young person, then it will remain there for the rest of their lives. We have seen that our region is digitally native. We all use smartphones. We all have internet, let's say. Wherever you go, you can mostly find internet. But we are digitally illiterate, meaning the tools that are there are not being used. As Georgi mentioned, it's 55% of digital skills on, let's say, basic digital skills. So how this can be approached? Two ways. One way is systematic approach from the schools. So bring the digital skills that are being used globally, bring it to the schools. So every school should teach the skills that are needed on the global marketplace. I'm saying again global because one thing is local, another thing is global. And we should not limit to the global opportunities to the youth and to any group. Why I'm not segmenting groups is because schools are, let's say, there for everyone, especially primary schools, so start learning digital skills from primary school. Second approach is work with groups through projects. I agree on that, in order to have more short-term success. So long-term success is a systematic approach through the schools. Yeah, short-term is projects that where skills are being taught, where the jobs are being matched. Yeah. So I will state that I had few meetings today as well, where the number 3,000 job places are opened at the moment in terms of IT in Kosovo only. So 3,000. There are 3,000 people that are lacking in terms of IT skilled people. These are not only programmers. So everybody, IT is not, of course, only programming. So we are seeing huge increase in women going into data analytics, which is a new, pretty new profession, let's call it. It's not a new, but pretty new profession. Software testers, digital accountants, digital marketing. So these are professions that we are seeing huge number of women joining. So basically, what I would conclude is we are seeing people looking for opportunities. It's sometimes what they lack is once they get these skills, even if they get these skills, they're lacking the knowledge on how to approach the job market. So this is also a crucial element. So you get some skills. Academies for us, for example, it's a one-year program where they learn practical skills. But the point is, after that, what we learned is that they're missing how to approach how to create an online, let's say, Upwork platform profile, how to promote themselves among the world, actually. Practical work, we added projects because we saw that this is something the companies are looking for. So it's a continuous work in creating opportunities for everyone, again. And what I think is all stakeholders should be working together. Some of the stakeholders have access to funds. Some of the stakeholders know the needs of a certain marginalized groups. Some of them have the programs to be taught. So working together as a joint community, again, is something that needs to be done day by day. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I think your conclusive remark, it's vital and extremely difficult to make it happening. You said all stakeholders should work together. The devil hides into two words, all and it should, because it's about who are the walls that we are talking about and who are those behind the processes that create the should. We are all agreeing that yes, it should happen. It's a tremendous work that needs to be done in order to create this inclusiveness from the perspective of those that are in need. And once again, I'm really appreciating this format and the fact that we have the chance to talk about all this, because underlines the relevance and importance of inclusiveness and of bringing in the process the stakeholders. Do we need to define them better? Do we need to work with them more? Do we need to persuade them more in order to be part of these processes? It's a work that is going to happen. But what you've said, all stakeholders should work together. I think it's one of the conclusions that we are all going to leave this meeting that we have. Thank you very much. Questions for Marcos? I need to clarify with our host to make sure that we have time for, and we have the room for us to move on into the break a bit more. How it's 14 to, it's 2:20. How much we are allowed to use this room?
Well, I think that we can use it for a bit, 15 minutes more, but I don't think that we can go much further because, I mean, these are parallel events going one after the other.
Yeah, that's why I asked. That's why I asked.
I mean, I would appreciate if we could keep also, I mean, the interventions short in terms of questions rather than, and so then we also have an additional speaker and then the concluding remarks. Sure. Thank you.
So please, the colleagues, friends, address the questions sharply and directly to...
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Sebastian Sherifovic. I'm from Kosovo, and I'm here with Operama Kosovo advocacy component. I have a question in terms of vulnerable communities, or in Kosovo context, specifically the Roma communities. How do you plan to approach the discrimination issue that is currently existing, especially in both primary and high schools? So basically my question is, how do you plan to tackle the issue of digitalization versus discrimination and the cybersecurity? My second question is more to the Roma panelists. How important do you think Romanian language is in the terms of today we use in terms of digitalization? And how can we make it easier for Roma people to access digital education and literacy? Thank you.
Very good question. Thank you very much. I will give the floor to Daniel, and then we see who can provide the answers.
Yeah, actually, I have also like 3 recommendations since we have the representative from the Commission here, and actually, before coming here, we Roma Active Albania, together with its partners, we did a brainstorming together, also thinking about some recommendations that would go to the European Commission, but also to the national governments, and we talked here about the digital illiteracy, which prevents actually Roma youth and their parents from accessing a multitude of job opportunities that rely on digital use of skills and tools, including the entrepreneurship world. Many Roma continue to use traditional methods in finding jobs and doing businesses, which acts as a barrier to achieving better income and financial sustainability. Actually, what we have seen also with other youngsters when we work is that this digitalization, we have seen also the online hate speech, which has been on raise. Online social platforms and media are used to spread hateful narratives and stereotypes against Roma, which further perpetuate a negative image about the Roma community, while contributing to feelings of insecurity and lack of self-worth, of confidence of Roma community. So I'll tell 1 or 2 recommendations to you, but I received your email. Thank you for your email, so we can also send by email some of the recommendations that we have. One of the recommendations that we have regarding national governments, they should ensure that investments and funds are mobilized to bridge the development and digital gap between Roma and non-Roma, while further investing in social inclusion and capacity building and empowerment of Roma out of poverty, social exclusion and discrimination. Actually, flagship projects at national level should be developed to map the digital needs of Roma community and to support awareness-raising campaigns and empowerment of Roma as part of the green and digital transition processes be implemented in the national governments. And also national projects and initiatives should support with priority the local and rural communities where economical development and digitalization are lagging actually behind.
Thank you, Daniel. Using the transfer of what you have produced by email, I think it helps the stakeholders that are around the table. I do apologize to our last speaker. It was just by the odds that you were the last speaker. It doesn't mean that the work that you have had so far is not important. Therefore, everybody is waiting for you, Nicola, to introduce what you did in the field that you've been working. Just for you to know, Nicola is an expert on communication and also an owner of a digital communication marketing agency. So I think the perspective he brings into somehow adds to the gaps that we have identified so far. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There's no need for apology, but thank you. As they said, my name is Nicola and I work in 2 fields. One field is communications, and the another one is youth activism and youth advocacy. So based on that, there was one campaign, as you have seen in agenda, that we implement for RCC and National Youth Council of Serbia in Serbia. the campaign about youth guarantee in Serbia. So the implementation of youth guarantee just started the last year in Serbia, and there is that institutional process that we are just waiting to be finished. And based on that, the National Youth Council of Serbia and the Regional Cooperation Council started that campaign that my agency implemented for them to be present in everyday life of young people in Serbia, to understand what youth guarantees are and how they will affect on their lives and their job applications and that part of their life when they're finishing their schools and starting to find their jobs. So I think that the most important thing that we need to say is that there is no change without youth and without young people. We need young people for any change, so digital change as well, because we can't do anything in our society without the energy of youth. We can sit like this and discuss and to find the projects and to implement projects and to have money for different activities, but without energy of young people we can't do anything in our society, especially in Western Balkans, because we have that big problem with young people that are going out from their countries and going out from Western Balkans, and we need to find the way to stop that and to encourage young people to start their businesses, to find their jobs and etc. in their own countries. I would say that our campaign was a good example for that, because we found a way to translate youth guarantees and all that project and program language to the language of youth. And that is the main job in my agency, to find a way to work with organizations for youth and youth organizations in Serbia, and to find a way to translate all that sentences that we have in our projects about raising awareness, about target groups, about implementation, etc., to find a way to make it understandable for young people. Because young people, they are not stupid. Young people are there and they understand what is the meaning of that terms, but they don't want to hear a lot of big words that we have in our projects, and they don't want to waste their time to listening for sentences that they are listening for their whole young period. So I would say that was good example, because our blog texts that we implemented on National Youth Council of Serbia website are written well. And if you Google, for example, Garancija za mlade, which is the term of youth guarantee in Serbian, it's the first ranked text in Serbian Google, and that is most important thing, because institutions too have they having too their text on websites about youth guarantees, but they are full of that language that I already mentioned. So I think it's really important to have that, I would say, bridge between young people and institutions through civil society and through organizations that can gain trust of young people, because based on researches of National Youth Council of Serbia, there is not a trust between young people and institutions, and I think that is the most important thing to build the trust between youth organizations, between civil society and the youth, and try to make the bridge with institutions. So if you have any questions how we did that and what we did it, because we don't have enough time, so I'm just trying to speedily brief all of this, but I would say that the most important thing to make the environment for young people to stay is in digitalization, and I think that we should use digitalization as a tool and as an environment to have our young people here and to include them in our processes, even in social society and institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Young people, I wouldn't say they are the future, they are the present. And it's good that you insisted on how important they are. And I would happily look through the work that you did to just for my own curiosity, to identify how many young people belonging to vulnerable groups, young women, young ethnic minorities, young disabled people are part of the processes that you are leading, because they are part of what we all call young people. And they should not be left aside. They should not be considered as regular as young people, because their needs are to be looked at from the particularities that they have. Thank you very much for your input. Do you have questions? Go ahead.
I also have a mic. I secured it earlier. No, thank you, and I will try to be very, very brief. Maybe a direct question to the last panelist, since this discussion is all directed to the Roma community. So if you have specific examples of including Roma youth in your platforms, share with us. And if no, if you could share some of the obstacles that you're facing, if they are not already included. And if I may very shortly, as a general conclusion, recommendation, take it as you want. But just if we are talking about Roma and this important topic, digital summit and digitalization, I think that we need to openly speak also mostly about the obstacles. Because someone mentioned earlier about the attempts and the policies that are already in place. I think now is the time to talk about real actions that Roma community does really deserves, and you know the reasons why. From the policy level, from the community level, from the international donors as well, because huge investments have been donated. And also the panelist from Macedonia, right? He mentioned in his presentations that it is an idea of the mindset. It has to do with the mindset. Well, if we're talking about Roma, I think as an additional remark will be good to know and to address and to reflect on it, is that we are talking specifically about missing of information. We're talking about direct discrimination, missing opportunities. Unfortunately, I also was downstairs today and I saw all of those youth where I might be wrong, I came only for this panel, but my eyes haven't seen any specific Roma that were working specifically on this digital agenda target project. So I'm just addressing it for the future because you are all important stakeholders. Let's try to put this conversation at the community level so we inform and educate people to them, what does it mean to be digitally involved? Because the conversation lacks to be understood there, and then we can target the policies and the real actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks, because you literally created the bridge to our host. As we are at the end of our session, you opened up the floor for our host. Thank you.
Wow. I've always thought that making the concluding remarks after a panel discussion is somehow easy, because you take everything the panelists are saying, so you can do the concluding remarks. However, after listening so many points raised, I have to confess that it's not that easy. But I'd like to, I'll try my best and use my skills in that. Hope I have enough. I'd like to say that this side event today was just the start of a discussion for an inclusiveness of many targeted groups and vulnerable groups. And as we heard, sometimes we consider vulnerable groups only a given community, and in this case, if I can say Roma community, but there are also other vulnerable groups that governments, international organizations, and all of us should not forget are disabled people, are elder people, are the ones that, as Patricia was saying, digitalization might help them to be in the market, but might also be a means for them to be outside completely. So it's not only a given community, in this case Roma, but we have to see it as an issue that the whole society should address, to see the digitalization as an instrument to make their and our lives easier rather than to exclude us from the opportunities. I think that a lot of focus from all the panelists was given to the education. And I'm sure that you would all agree that education is a long-standing objective that would for sure help the sustainability in the skills we offer in the market in the long run, and of course helps the generation of the future to be able to fill the gaps and to respond to the market needs. But don't forget that we cannot wait for the new generations to come, because we are all in a society in which we need to also address the needs of the generations who are not kids. But even among us, I'm sure that, as Marco was saying, although we are all using smartphones, I'm sure that we are not using or getting the best of the applications and everything we can to ease our lives. And given we all need those skills to access better the public services, e-services, and I think that it's not only a matter of a given community, but all of us. And I liked a lot what you said, Patricia, in creating the alliances. Again, I'm not a Roma expert, I cannot even think of it, but I think that what you said also in Digital Boost Academy, and also trying to make this inclusive and support partners, and I know that was also supported by the RCC. I think that in a way it helps to create the alliances, and this is the other point that I want to take. Instead of saying all the stakeholders, usually we cannot identify all the stakeholders because sometimes you cannot identify them all, and even if you identify them all, might be not possible to network and coordinate them all. But I think that creating alliances towards the objectives we want to achieve might be another way of addressing what we're saying. And having the club of the entrepreneurs and the businesses who support given communities, I think might be another, let's say, way out of it. I would like to say that given the interlinks between digital, green needs of many targeted groups, the challenge would be to identify what is the need that you need to address in a given moment that can respond to improving the lives of our citizens and the well-being. All we do at the end of the day, although I don't work for the government anymore, but I used to work for the government, and what all the governments do worldwide and what the partner organizations aim to do is provide the means to improve the well-being of citizens. So if we can also have this in mind, and as Mimosa was saying, if we can bring to the next level the awareness of the needs of the vulnerable groups, to make what digitalization brings helpful to them rather than an obstacle for them to get into the market, either be it for an employment opportunity or be it for a better life or getting a service, do their daily things. I think that that should be our next challenge, and we should not stop saying it openly. And thanks a lot to also all the Roma community representatives today. I think that despite you are saying all this from your perspective, I'm sure that for everyone else who is not from the Roma community, you are bringing a lot on the table of the needs that are not only yours, but are all to the society as a whole. So thank you very much for all the contributions and all said today. And that's also promise, also us as a regional organization, and we as RCC are usually a good host. We would continue to keep this narrative and try to gather as many stakeholders and target groups as possible around the table, so we can also learn how to address each other's needs and what a good experience from one target group would help another target group. So I would conclude this let's say, this part of the side event with a big thank you to all of you for being today in this side event. Thanks a lot, Georgi, for providing a very, let's say, clear perspective of how EU is supporting the region in this regard. Thank you to our facilitator for the discussion, and above all, thank you to the panelists for very constructive points in this panel and this discussion. Thanks a lot, everyone, and till the next time, enjoy the rest of the summit, and I'm sure that you'll get a lot of good messages from it. Thank you.
Thank you.